Oh boy, the Fairly Odd Parents gets dark. Now for everyone who was a fan of this show growing up, and I say growing up because I'm referring to the people who actually got to witness this show in its prime. I'm pretty sure you all remember this one particular episode called Imaginary Gary. This episode is insanely creepy, and in my opinion, it's one of the darkest episodes out of the entire series. Be sure to drop a like for your boy because that really helps with the growth of my channel. Now let's get into this video. Now this episode kicks off with Timmy's mom in the kitchen baking a pie when Timmy walks in and asks her if she wants to play a game called Surgeon General. She tells Timmy that she would love to play, but unfortunately she can't because she has to watch her pie cook. This is when Timmy's dad walks in and Timmy asks him the exact same question when he also says he can't play either because he has to watch the pie bake as well. So you mean to tell me it takes both of you guys to watch that abomination that was supposed to be a pie? Talk about neglecting your child. But I guess that's why he has fairies in the first place. Now this upsets Timmy that his parents won't spend time with him, and he says it's days like this when he misses Gary the most. Wanda says, "Who's Gary?" And this is when Cosmo says,
"You know, Gary! Remember from the party? Timmy, who's Gary?"
Timmy then pulls out the old box filled with items he used to play with when he was 5. And this box was also a picture of Timmy and Gary. Timmy says Gary was the coolest friend he ever had before Cosmo and Wanda came along. This is when things get weird when Timmy shows Cosmo and Wanda pictures of him and Gary, but if you notice in all the pictures, Timmy appears to be the only present one. Now Cosmo and Wanda didn't really know what to think about this situation. They were looking at each other like, yeah, this man was clearly desperate because he was imagining his own best friend. Timmy also says that whenever he was lonely and needed someone to play with, Gary would always be there. Now immediately after this, Timmy makes a quick drastic decision to wish his imaginary best friend into a real human. Now I saw the look of concern on Cosmo and Wanda's face, almost like they didn't want to grant the wish, but they go ahead and do it cause why the f not? So they grant Timmy's wish and Gary is now a real human. Timmy then gets excited and tries to hug Gary, but he pushes him off like a peasant and says public affection is not cool. Cosmo and Wanda proceed to dwell on how cool Gary was, but to me, off rip, my first impression of this kid was that he was a sneaky one at that. I mean, bros, even as a kid watching this for the first time, I saw right through Gary's bullshit, and I just immediately got the vibe that he wasn't a trustworthy character. So after this, Timmy starts naming games and activities that he would like to play with Gary, but Gary brushes all of it off and says it's lame. So Timmy says, well, what's cool to you? We then see Timmy go in the kitchen and ask to borrow his parents' car. So I'm guessing Gary is trying to go joyriding in his parents' car, which Timmy's bonehead dad was about to give him the keys, but his mom caught on and said no. Timmy tells his mother that he is only trying to go to the arcade with Gary when his mom is shocked to hear him mention that name. Now both Timmy's parents acknowledged that Gary was his imaginary best friend when he was younger. They had even taken Timmy to therapy to try to fix this problem, but they are shocked when Gary walks right in the kitchen. I mean, my guy walked in looking like a young Chip Skylark. His parents was like, well damn, I guess this little ninja is real. Then this man pulls out an apple and literally eats the entire apple in one bite. These cartoons be wildin', bruh. Like, this little ninja is obviously not human. Name one human that can do that. Now it's the next day at school. Chester, AJ, and Sanjay are sitting around the playground playing with a possum when Chester says he wishes Timmy was there. We then see Timmy walking up with Gary when Gary intentionally trips Timmy. Now all the bros were looking at them walk up and they had to have seen Gary trip Timmy, but they just ignore it and begin to admire how cool Gary was. It's like this man can hypnotize you from his coolness just by being in your presence. I mean, he even makes Chester pass out like a little Timmy then suggests that all the bros play Surgeon General when Gary completely brushes his idea off and says, let's go do something that's actually cool and not that lame ass shit. Wanda even notices that the guys seem more interested in Gary than in Timmy. So another day goes by and Timmy is in the lunchroom getting his food when Trixie taps him on the shoulder and asks Timmy to introduce her to his cool new friend Gary. When we then look over and see Gary on the other side of the lunchroom just talking down on my guy Timmy.
And who wears pink hats anyway, huh?
It was at this moment Timmy had enough. Like, you're gonna sit there, take all my friends, and mac on the girl I've been trying to smash since forever. That does it. Timmy asks Gary to see him outside, and this man is still macking on even on his way outside.
What's the deal? Ever since you've been here, all you've been doing is winning.
Tell me this man is not a young Chip Skylark. Anyways, Timmy asks Gary why he's basically stealing his entire life, and this is when Gary really starts to show his true colors to Timmy's face. He tells Timmy that he's just jealous because everyone would much rather hang out with him, and maybe Timmy is the one who should be an imaginary friend. Now, as we can see, Gary is very much so aware of the fact that he was an imaginary friend. Yeah, I don't think that's how this wish was supposed to work. Gary was only supposed to be made a real boy, but not aware of the fact that he was actually an imaginary friend. The fact that he knows this makes this situation even creepier. After this is when starts to get real. Timmy tells Gary that he has overstayed his welcome and demands Cosmo and Wanda to put him back inside his head. And right before they were about to make this wish, Gary commands them not to, and they actually listen to him.
I wish Gary was back at the house. And I wish I wasn't.
Timmy says, what the f, make the wish? When Cosmo explains to Timmy that Gary is a part of him, which technically means taking orders from Gary is basically like taking orders from Timmy. Now this is a tricky situation. Looks like at this time, Jorgen von Strangle didn't have any rules in the handbook to prevent this type of thing from happening. Gary even says Cosmo and Wanda listen to him better than they listen to Timmy. Timmy is not trying to hear none of this. He wishes that Gary was back in his mind, and Gary counters his wish and says he wishes Timmy was there with him. Things get even weirder when they both get transferred into Timmy's imagination. A barrel then rolls up and out comes a bunch of old toys Timmy used to play with when he was 5. They trap Cosmo and Wanda, then right before Timmy was about to wish his way out, some Teletubby knockoffs come out of nowhere and plugs Cosmo and Wanda's ears so they can't hear Timmy make his wish. Gary then appears on top of a large box and says this is the box that Timmy kept him trapped in for 5 years. Apparently when Timmy got older and put away all his 5-year-old toys, Gary was also trapped in the box because the memories Timmy had about Gary were attached to those items. So when Timmy stopped playing with these toys, he stopped thinking about Gary. Gary orders the box to attack Timmy when Timmy starts to run away. Gary then sends a big wave of jacks at him and manages to wash him up. He then traps him on the floor and builds a wall made of Legos around him. Timmy says,
Gary, why?
Gary explains to Timmy that he stopped playing with him 5 years ago. He said Timmy tossed him aside once he got real new friends, like he was one of those old toys. This is when Gary tries to crush Timmy and all the old toys they used to play with. Timmy says, hold on bruh, I'm 10 now and I only know 10-year-old stuff. And 10 obviously beats 5. Timmy then emerges in a big Surgeon General suit. Now if you're wondering where he got this suit from, keep in mind they're still in his imagination. So everything Timmy thinks about will become real, or at least appear to be real. Timmy tells Gary to stand the fuck down because this is his mind and there is only one ruler. Gary then tries to scare Timmy with the old monster that Timmy thought used to live in his closet. For a second he is scared, but remembers that when he was 6, he found out that the supposed monster was only a sweater. He also tells Gary when he was 8, he learned what a real monster was like. He introduces Vicky to Gary, and Vicky literally eats this man. Now, if you thought this man was dead, then think again, because he says,
I will get out of here. And when I do, oh yes, you'll pay.
Everything then goes back to normal, almost, because while they were trying to recap, they totally forgot it was a giant evil Vicky behind them. Timmy wishes them out of his mind, and we see things go back to normal for real this time. Timmy says after this, he thinks it's best that Gary stays an imaginary friend, and he will never get out ever again. After this, we see that Vicky didn't like the taste of Gary, so she spits him out. This is when Gary sees the exit door to Timmy's imagination, and we see that Cosmo definitely didn't lock the door. Now, Gary does escape, because we see in season 5 episode 7, Escape from Unwish Island, Gary makes another appearance. But anyways, tell me what you guys think about this creepy episode down below, and until next time, peace.